It was a bright, humid morning in a quiet suburb near Orlando, Florida. Palm trees swayed gently in the breeze as Stephen Curry, one of the most recognized athletes in the world, stood in front of a modest, well-kept house tucked at the end of a peaceful cul-de-sac. He wore sunglasses and a simple hoodie, keeping a low profile. This wasn't a publicity stunt. No cameras, no press, just Stephen and a deep, personal mission. The house wasn't a mansion, it wasn't extravagant, but it was perfect. One story, a wide porch, and a backyard big enough for Sunday barbecues and quiet evenings. It was a place for rest, a place for reflection, a place for his father, Del Curry. Del had always been proud and independent. Even after retiring from the NBA, he had never leaned on Stephen for help. But Stephen knew, behind the jokes, behind the stoic presence, that Del had been quietly struggling with aging, loneliness, and the emotional weight of having dedicated his life to others. Stephen had found the house himself, arranged the paperwork in secret, and paid it off in full. All that was left was to give his father the keys. That afternoon, Stephen drove to Charlotte to pick Del up under the pretense of spending a weekend together in Florida. His father, skeptical but intrigued, packed a small bag and joined him. For the trip, as they approached the house, Del looked around curiously. "Whose place is this?" he asked, his brow furrowed. Stephen smiled. "Yours," Del laughed. "Nah, come on, who are we visiting?" Stephen turned off the engine, handed him a single silver key and said, "No joke, Dad, this is for you." For a moment, Del said nothing. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the key. Then he looked at Stephen, not as the world-famous basketball star, but as the boy he had raised. "Why would you do this for me?" he finally asked. Stephen shrugged, emotions swelling in his chest. "Because you spent your life giving. Now it's your turn to receive." But what Stephen didn't know, what he couldn't possibly anticipate, it was that his father had a different plan for the house, a plan that would soon capture the attention of the entire community. Del Curry spent his first night in the Florida home sitting on the porch in silence. The warm air carried the scent of jasmine, and the occasional hum of cicadas filled the space between his thoughts. Inside, the house was beautifully furnished, everything chosen with care. It was clear Stephen had poured love into every detail, but Del wasn't at peace. The next morning, he walked barefoot across the hardwood floors, examining every corner like a man searching for something deeper than comfort. He sat at the kitchen table, hands folded, staring at the walls. When Stephen returned with coffee and breakfast, Del greeted him with a soft nod and a serious expression. "Steph," he began, "this place is incredible, but I can't keep it." Stephen looked up, confused. "What do you mean? You haven't even lived in it for a day." Del took a deep breath. "You gave me this house because you thought I needed rest. But rest isn't what I need. Purpose is." He stood and walked to the window. Outside, a group of local kids rode bikes past the cul-de-sac. A few looked through the fence, curious about the new occupant. Del watched them for a moment before turning back to Stephen. "I want to turn this place into something more than a retirement home. I want to make it useful." Stephen was quiet, letting his father speak. "There's a lot of kids in this neighborhood with nowhere to go after school. Their parents work late. Some of them hang out in the streets, others get into trouble. This house, this space, it could be something more. A safe place, a center, a second home." Stephen blinked, processing his father's words. "Like a youth center." Del smiled, the idea already forming in his mind. "Exactly. Something that gives them what basketball gave us: discipline, confidence, family." At first, Stephen hesitated. This was supposed to be a gift, a quiet thank you. But as he listened, he realized that this was Del's rest. This was his peace. "You really want to do this?" Stephen asked, his voice low. Del nodded. "I've never been more sure of anything. And just like that, the idea that began as a personal gift transformed into something far greater, a mission that neither father nor son had anticipated, but one that would soon change lives. Weeks passed, and the transformation began. Quiet home Stephen Curry had bought for his father slowly turned into a construction zone. Walls were repainted with brighter colors. Furniture was moved to create open spaces. Local contractors came in to help, many of them surprised when they found out who was behind the project. Not just Stephen Curry, the global basketball icon, but his father Del, a retired player most had watched on TV growing up. But for Del, this wasn't about fame. It was about building something real. He personally interviewed local youth counselors, volunteers, and former athletes who wanted to give back. They didn't want a place filled with cameras and press. They wanted a place where kids could show up, feel safe, and be mentored without judgment. A place to belong. One afternoon, Del stood outside, holding a clipboard and watching as a team installed a new basketball hoop in the driveway. Stephen joined him, wearing casual shorts and a Warriors t-shirt, still sweating from a morning training session. "This feels right," Del said, still watching the crew work. Stephen looked around. "It's crazy. I bought this house thinking you'd just enjoy the peace and maybe plant tomatoes," Del laughed. "I don't have the patience for tomatoes." "You've never been good at sitting still," Stephen smiled. They walked inside where two teenagers, Malik and Jaden, were helping arrange donated books and board games in what used to be the formal living room. Malik was quiet but always listening. Jaden was full of questions. "Mr. Curry," Jaden asked Del, "is it true you played with Michael Jordan?" Del grinned. "I played against him. Big difference. But yeah, I got torched a few times." Jaden's eyes widened. "That's wild, man." Stephen watched the exchange and noticed something important. The way these kids looked at his father, not like an old man in a retired athlete's shadow, but like a leader, a mentor, a man who showed up. By the end of that week, the house had a new name, the Second Chance Center. It wasn't fancy. There was no grand opening, just a hand-painted sign out front and a promise that anyone who walked through those doors would be treated with respect, no matter where they came from. One night, as Del locked the doors after a long day of workshops and pickup games, he sat on the porch where it all began. Stephen joined him, two cold drinks in hand. "You ever regret not just taking it easy?" Stephen asked. Del looked at the kids laughing on the sidewalk, the sunset painting the Florida sky orange and gold. "Not for a second," he said. This is the most important thing I've ever done." Stephen didn't reply. He didn't have to. He just nodded, proud. What started as a quiet gift had turned into a legacy. Months passed, and the Second Chance Center had become a cornerstone of the local community. Kids who once skipped school now showed up early to play ball with Del. Parents who worked late shifts trusted the center to keep their children safe and inspired. Stories of change, a young boy learning to read, a troubled teen discovering photography, a single mother finding support, spread across the neighborhood like wildfire. But no one outside the community really knew what was happening. Until Stephen changed that. On a bright Saturday morning, Stephen Curry posted a photo on Instagram, just a simple picture of the house, the porch, and the freshly painted Second Chance Center sign. Caption: "My dad turned a house into hope." Proud doesn't even begin to cover it. The post exploded. News outlets picked it up, fans shared it everywhere, and suddenly people across the country wanted to know what Del Curry was doing in a quiet Florida neighborhood. That same week, a small documentary crew arrived, not to sensationalize, but to tell the truth. They filmed real moments, Del coaching kids through drills, serving snacks, leading life lessons in the living room. There were no scripted scenes, no celebrity cameos, just life, real, raw, and powerful. A few days later, the Curry family held a community barbecue in front of the center. Hundreds of locals came, along with athletes, former coaches, and even some of Stephen's teammates. Del stood on a small makeshift stage with a microphone, clearly uncomfortable in the spotlight. "I didn't build this place to be famous," he said. "I built it because when Stephen gave me this house, I realized something. My time on the court was just the beginning. This is the real legacy." Stephen stood nearby, arms crossed, eyes glistening. He wasn't the superstar here. Del was. As the event wrapped up, one of the kids, Jaden, stood beside Del and whispered, "You gave me a second chance. One day, I'm gonna do that. For someone else." Del smiled and put a hand on his shoulder. "That's all I ever wanted." That night, Stephen and Del sat again on the same porch. No cameras, no crowd, just a father and son. "You know," Stephen said, "I thought I was giving you something." Del looked over at him, quiet for a moment. "You did, but what I did with it, that was my choice." They sat in silence, the stars above them, and the sounds of laughter echoing down the street. And in that moment, Stephen Curry realized something deeper than any NBA title or three-point record. Sometimes the greatest legacy isn't what you leave behind, it's what you help others build. In a world obsessed with titles, recognition, and fame, we often forget the true essence of success. Stephen Curry's journey with his father's house reminds us that greatness isn't measured by the number of championships or MVPs. It's defined by how we use our influence to transform lives. When Stephen gave his father the house, it was a symbol of his success. But what Del did with that house turned it into something far more powerful. He didn't just accept a gift, he turned it into a lifeline for the community. He gave children a place to belong, he gave troubled youth a chance to heal, and he gave hope to those who had none. Del didn't just want to be remembered as a former NBA player. He wanted to be remembered as someone who gave, who built something that could outlast him. And in doing so, he taught Stephen and all of us a lesson far greater than any basketball game ever could. True legacy isn't built on what we collect, but on what we contribute. It's not about how much you have, but how much you give. It's not about receiving a gift. It's about using that gift to create something that changes the world around you. Stephen's realization came not in a locker room or a press conference, but in the quiet moments of watching his father shape lives. What started as a gift became a movement, one that taught us all that real power lies not in what we can achieve for ourselves, but in how we help others achieve more than they ever thought possible. In the end, the most lasting impact we can have is not through wealth or fame, but through service. The courage to give, to inspire, to lift others up. That's the true measure of greatness. Because when you help others rise, you rise with them. The real victory is in empowering those who need it most, and that's where true greatness lies. Life. We often measure success by what we achieve, the trophies, the records, the praise. But as Stephen Curry discovered, true legacy isn't about the fame or the accolades. It's about the lives you touch, the difference you make, and the seeds you plant for the future. When Stephen bought his father a house, it wasn't just about gifting him a property. It was about giving him the space and freedom to create something meaningful, something that would go beyond their own family. The Second Chance Center was never meant to be just a building. It became a sanctuary, a beacon of hope for so many who needed it most. Del Curry could have easily enjoyed his retirement quietly, living in peace. But he chose to do something bigger, something that would live on long after the spotlight faded. And in doing so, he taught everyone around him that it's not about what you get, but what you give. Stephen, too, learned a profound lesson. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give isn't wrapped in gold or fame, but in the form of an opportunity, the chance to change, to grow, to inspire others. In the end, legacy isn't just what you leave behind. It's how you make others feel and what they're able to build because of your actions. True greatness lies in empowering others to become great.